Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minutes here and welcome back to the workbench for another unboxing. Today, as you can see, I'm going to be looking at the brand new DBMK Hawker Sea Fury FB.11 in 1/32 scale. So let's get stuck inside this rather large box and see what we have. So on the front cover, you can see this exciting image of the Sea Fury launching its rockets. And at the bottom left, it does tell us that there are 338 parts included, 117 photo etch parts, and we even have some metal rods and clear film. I believe the metal rods are for the landing gear and the clear film are for the control panels. So that's the front of the box. We do have an item code of DBMK 32001. This is their first production release of the Sea Fury. I believe the Hornet, the de Havilland Hornet, is also another kit that's released at the same kind of time as this one. So there's two kits basically available at the moment, but this is 001 being the first release. If we go onto this edge here, you can see that we have some dimensions. So the dimensions there are indicated for both the folded and unfolded versions. So we have the option to display our aircraft in the different configurations. And then the next section, we have some information about how the steps were taken in order to design this kit. So I was actually at the launch event at Navy Wings in Yeovilton when DBMK released this kit. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to collect my review sample then. And as a small note, I have paid for this. This is a paid product. I have not received this for free, so everything I'm expressing in this video is completely my own opinion. We do have a cartograph logo here, which indicates the decals are going to be to a pretty nice quality. And there is the Eduard logo, which tells us the photo etches from them. A little bit more saying that this was designed in Ukraine and molded in England. So they did go through a bit of their production process whilst we were at the release day. This is a bit of an international affair. I believe the artwork was created by someone in Poland. The designer is Ukrainian. The molding is done in the UK at Plastech, which is a company in England. On this edge here, we have 7 paint schemes included, which is pretty good. It's quite a lot of paint schemes, and you can see there's a good variety there, but we will look at them in a little bit more detail once we get the box open. The thin edge only features the same information that we've already seen on the front. Nothing new on those thin edges, but they are orientated in different directions depending on how you stack it on the shop. I'm really struggling with space here. The rear of the box doesn't have anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this box open and see what we have. Of course, when I went to the launch day, they had some pre-production samples already made up. It was a very impressive looking model. And as I talk through this video, no doubt I will put some information or some clips up from that launch event. There would have been other content creators at the event who filmed the whole thing. So I will link them and their videos below if you would like a deeper dive into that. So here we are. Everything comes in their own little bags. What I think I'm going to do, because this is quite a big kit, is as usual, I'm going to start with the paperwork and then we'll come back to the decals and then the plastic parts, etc. So instruction booklet then, and you can see we've got the same image we had on the front. However, it is worth noting that this product is effectively in memory of Konstantin, who designed this kit but unfortunately lost his life in the Ukraine conflict defending his home country. So unfortunately we'll never see any projects from this person again, so this is almost a testament to this individual. And it's good actually that they managed to get it into production and it was in a position where it could be manufactured. So on the next page, we have a sprue map. Everything here is in color, which is really good. DBMK, brand new company. They've taken on board a lot of the criticisms that other companies have had in the past, and they seem to have learned from it. So we've got a sprue map, which is always great to see. We've got a key to the different symbols. We also do have some notes here about things that may or may not be required. So that obviously leads into the fact that they've tried to think about adding in different versions of this, so there could be future releases. And then we have color charts. And I did actually speak to Ilya. Ilya was one of the sort of co-founders of the company. And he was saying about how some of these, they have done a lot of research and they can't find specific like paint colors or codes for them. So like Hawker Primer, as an example, it's almost like there are loads of different, or there's not enough references. So they've done their best to try and provide you with as accurate a bit of information, and it's all down to like actual paint codes and British standards and names rather than individual paint brands. So the idea there being that maybe not all paint brands are quite as consistent as others, so it's up to the modeler then to decide what you want to do. And then we're into the assembly. So as you can see, we have the option of installing photo etch parts, or if you don't want to use the photo etch parts, the plastic parts are generally good enough to build the model to an acceptable standard, but the photo etch will just give it an extra piece of like weight or detail. So we've got the option to include photo etch or just use the molded control panel. We have parts of our reflector gun sight, which again can be film and photo etch. As we come through, there's loads of details which need to be put inside of the cockpit, loads of little bits of photo etch. Same with the seat, we've got seat belts which are photo etch, which is a nice touch. As we come on through, you can see we've got little diagrams as well, giving measurements and how the parts need to be positioned. And then we come on to the engine exhaust stacks. Now, one point about the engine exhaust stacks that they did say was that they haven't like molded them hollow, but they've put a little indent in the end of the exhaust just for you to get your drill centered. So if you wanted to drill it out, you could. They've given the modeler choices here. We're coming on down, we've got landing gear assemblies, which we install into sort of the rear bay for this one. Then we add our cockpit and landing gear inside. That's fairly standard. And then we come on to the engine representation. So there is a small like engine representation in here, but there is an aftermarket part you can get to actually display the engine like open and with more detail. But I believe that's a resin and you get it from a different company. But there's already aftermarket stuff for this. Brand new kit, and there's already aftermarket out there for it. Landing gear bays, we come on through. You can see that if you would like to install wires and things inside a landing gear bay, they've given you a diagram and the dimension of the wire that you need to use. I don't know if I will, maybe not. Come on down, and we are still working on our landing gear bays. They said the landing gear bays are detailed enough that you probably wouldn't necessarily need to add the extra details unless you really wanted to. Continue with these steps, and then we come on to our two options for having either the wings folded or extended. Personally, I'll probably go for extended because I just like to have my planes in there almost ready to fly pose, but naturally it's really great that they've added the option to have it folded. Lots of different parts for that. If we want to install fuel tanks in the lower surface of the wing, we have the option to drill out holes for that, and then we come on through. There is a note here saying that the injection molding process means that they've had to put a joint across a panel. And there is a little note here saying that it's easier to reinstate rivets if you've had to fill and sand. So there is the option to add a little bit of extra. They thought about that. They did mention that in the sort of day that we had with them. Tail surfaces get added on. They are single parts, so you do potentially have the option to position them if you would prefer. We then do the wheels, landing gear, covers, etc. I believe that there are, there's late and early legs, depending on the variant you're doing. And then we add those onto the model as well. If you're doing the wing folded, we need to install these components. And then we have little markers inside of the wings for our bombs or rockets, depending on the version. I did speak to them again the other day, and they said that typically armament would not be attached to the wings if it was in the folded position, which is just an extra bit of research that they had done. Continue building up the wings, lots of little bits and pieces that need to go into there, and then they can eventually be added onto the aircraft. We have our fuel tanks, which can be added as well. Here you can see they've added the mounts for the rockets, but not the rockets themselves. And then as we come on through, you can see that we add rockets or bombs to the lower sides. There are some navigation lights and a pitot tube. And then we come to the final steps. Footstep for the pilot, cockpit canopy parts, and I even tell you how far back the cockpit canopy should be positioned if you want to have it in the open position. So open or closed is an option here. Of course, one thing that we haven't seen is a raised landing gear option. I do believe it wouldn't be too difficult, however, to install the landing gear covers in that position if you prefer. But as there's no pilot, and I might, in a 30-second scale, it's going to be quite a large pilot, and this has had a lot go into it. I can understand why pilot figures are not generally included. Perhaps an aftermarket one will appear at some point in the future. Now we're on to painting and decaling schemes, and they're printed in full color, which makes it so much easier to understand what we're doing. So the first one we have here is one from May 1948. This is the one I'm tempted to do because this is actually the one that was in the Navy Wings hangar whilst we were there for the launch day. So I would quite like to do this one. Naturally, it might be one of the more simple paint schemes, being dark sea grey upper and sky colour lower. Moving on, slightly more complicated, a similar paint scheme, but this time with almost like invasion stripes. I don't think they were invasion stripes because it's from the 1950s, but they, you know, had them. And then another variant of this from 1949, but this time with a red nose. Moving on, we have a Australian one in all metal. And then we have one Australian one in the dark blue. I've already done one of these, I think, in 1/48 scale, or one that's similar, so I'm probably not going to go for that one. We also have a Canadian one, and we also have one from the Netherlands. So there's a good variety there, not all focused on one country. We've got some different versions, so there's lots of choice. Stencil diagrams are provided as well, because otherwise the decal instructions would be too complicated. And that's it. That's it for the instructions. Right. Up next then we have the cartograph decals, and as you can see, this is a pretty large sheet. Of course it's going to be quite large because we have 7 paint schemes on there. So at the, I think it's the bottom, actually we'll start at the bottom. At the bottom we have all of our common stencils. So there's quite a few on there, but not that many. They did say that they had added extras for things they had seen but may not be necessarily required for every paint scheme that you're going to do. So, you know, have a look through and see which ones you need. And then we have a good selection of all of the other ones. There is, I thought there was a blemish then, but there isn't anything. Yeah, these are printed to a lovely quality. Cartograph do make some lovely decals. You can see the film isn't particularly thick. The registration is really nice. Color saturation is good. So these are normally silkscreen printed, which means that they are, you know, usually really top notch. I don't generally have any problems with cartograph decals. They normally go onto the model quite nicely. Of course, the thing is with having 7 decal schemes, and you've only got one kit, I did suggest the idea that something like what Eduard do, perhaps they can sell just the sprues at some point, so you could build another version to use up some of the other decals that you've got here, because there's quite a lot. And it would be a shame for these to just like be left in the stash once you finish the build. But yeah, these decals are really nice. You can see that we have a copyright date of 2024, but that's naturally when these would have been designed. The kit itself is a 2026 release, so it takes time. It's taken them, I think they said it was like 3 years to get it from like announcement to actually into manufacture. So those are the decals. Let us now look at the other elements of the kit. We have a little sheet of pre-printed photo etch, and this has like control panel and little controls, and I think like little bits of the seat belts on there as well. So you don't have to paint them, they're already done for you. These are one of those that are made by Eduard, and you know, they look really quite nice. So that's a nice little addition to add some extra detail. We also have a sheet of film for your gun sight and some metal rods. The metal rods are to help support the landing gear because it's quite a large aircraft in 1/32 scale. So the metal rods are going to help reinforce the strength of the landing gear. We also have some extra photo etch. Mine seems to have taken a little bit of a crease there. Mine's got a little fold in it, but I imagine that if I'm careful and I just flatten it back out again, it won't be a problem. That's nicely reproduced. You can see there's like a little grill and things there. That's really quite lovely. That's come out really nice. Just a little shame about the slight fold there, but you know, these things happen. I think the best place to start next is with the clear parts. So you get one sprue of clear parts, and you can see that we have our front windscreen, our main canopy, and some other little bits and pieces as well, but there's not a great deal. The plastic is quite nicely reproduced. It doesn't feel particularly greasy. The canopy framework is reasonably proud. If you wanted to mask that yourself, definitely could. There is some subtle details and things on there, which is pretty good. But yeah, there's no flash or anything. The only thing worth noting is because of the bulge that the main canopy has, they had to slide mold it, so extra parts of the mold slide in and out to hold it in place, which means that there is a slight seam down the center, which you might be able to see. That's kind of unavoidable with slide molding, but the reason they've done that is to get the sort of bulge of the canopy. So there is a little bit of a scuff, a little bit of a seam down the center. I'm I mean, it's not massively noticeable. On the pre-production samples, when I was looking at them, the seam was quite like defined, but actually on this one, it doesn't look too bad. You might not even really, like in certain lights, notice it. Of course, maybe a little bit of polishing and sanding to just work that back, and you'd never know it was there. There is a little bit of waviness in the plastic, but for the most part, you can see that it is quite nice and clear. So yeah, clear parts produced to a lovely quality. So plastic parts then, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A nice even number of plastic sprues. That's a lot of plastic that you're getting inside of this kit. I will briefly look at each one in turn to see what we have on them. So let's start with the first one that I put down. And fortunately, this is the one that contains the fuselage halves. So we'll have a look at these straight off the bat. We've got internal cockpit elements, fuselage halves, some tail surfaces, and some other smaller details here. So smaller details then, they are molded to a nice degree of accuracy. There doesn't seem to be any flash. There is a bit of flash on like the sprue, but there's, or the frame rather, but there's no flash that I can see on the actual plastic parts. The outside of the aircraft has some slight stressed skin in places, and also you can see lots of fine rivet work. That's come out really nicely. The builds that we saw in like their pre-production sample stage, which were at the display day, were, you know, really quite nice, the way they've been done, and all the little details have been picked out. So yeah, that's come out quite nice. Internally then, you can see there's nothing in here, but we're going to build up a cockpit anyway, so that's not going to be a problem. Ejector pins appear to be primarily on this side, and I don't think that any of them are on visible surfaces, which means we shouldn't actually have to do any work to clean up any ejector pins, which is good. So yeah, very impressive detail straight off the bat, completely up to modern standards. This one then contains our lower surface of an aircraft. There are a few little sprue gates in places that need removing. This does look like a tiny little bit of flash here, which might need a little bit of removal, but that's nothing too difficult to manage. Smaller details are nicely reproduced. These surfaces again benefit from fine rivet details. Recessed panel lines are quite nice. The plastic doesn't feel greasy. It's relatively dense with a little bit of flex in it. Control panel there, that's come out pretty good. So if you didn't want to use the photo etch, you wouldn't have to. If you didn't want to, you could just get a nice coat of paint on there, maybe pick out the dials if you wanted to. Other side, same kind of deal. Ejector pins are on this side, but I don't think you're going to notice them. Like on these parts here, you can see we've got rivet detail rather than like any ejector pins, which is good. This sprue has our wheels, and those are nicely represented. You can see we've got different tires, different treads on those. That's come out quite good. We also have some more wheels. I presume those are the other halves. And we have upper wing surfaces. Again, level of detail on that is really nicely reproduced. No flash here that I can see. Some of these details are raised actually, so there's some raised rivet details on the tail surface here. Flipping over, there's little bits of detail on the inside as well. I presume that's for like lights or something. That's interesting. Would there be a light there? No, the lights are here. So that's interesting. I'm not sure what that's for. Maybe it's just to help them bond together. A smaller sprue then. This one has, yeah, so it's the same texture on this one here actually. So it's probably just like to locate things and put them together. This has landing gear components and bits and pieces. Those are our engine exhausts. You can see that they're partially drilled out. There's like a little, almost like a little centered hole in there. I don't know if I'll bother drilling it out, but if you wanted to, you absolutely could. This side has some detail, but mostly ejector pins are on this side, but I don't think you're going to be seeing them. This is the side with all the detail on. And again, everything is nicely reproduced. Early and late landing gear legs, depending on which version you're going to do. This one has the sprue for our bombs. So it's my understanding that you only get 2 bombs included, but there are technically like 4 tail surface for the bombs. Apparently the reason was because they realized that there was the ailerons that were in the kit couldn't be positioned at an angle when the wings were folded, so they had to insert new parts for that, or an extra bit, which obviously meant they had to remove something from the sprue. But you still have enough to complete your bombs as displayed. These look pretty nice. These ailerons have raised rivet details on them. Nicely crisply molded once again. This sprue contains our rockets. And again, it's the same kind of deal. The level of detail is quite nice. No flash. Fine details are nicely reproduced. This is looking to be quite an impressive kit. This sprue has all of our finer pipework and things. This is the area where things could get a little bit tricky. There are little bits of flash on a few little bits and pieces, tiny little bit of flash in a few places just to keep an eye out for, but nothing major. The small plastic parts seem to have come out of the mold with no problems. There's no stress marks or anything, so that's good. This sprue has more of our ailerons and other smaller details. Again, same kind of deal. Have come out of the moulding quite nice. Maybe a tiny little bit of flash in a few little select places, but nothing really major, like you wouldn't even necessarily notice it if you weren't looking for it. But that's pretty decent. This one has our representation of engine detail. As I mentioned earlier, there is an aftermarket part to display the engine open if you would prefer. Engine cowling components, landing gear, doors. There are some slight stress marks here. I think possibly an ejector pin. Yes, an ejector pin's hit that and given a bit of a stress mark on it. So there are some ejector pin marks on visible surfaces here. Hopefully they aren't too visible because I know the landing gear leg's going to go across that. The stress mark shouldn't detract from the build. These are our propeller blades. They are individual parts. Or are they actually? No, because they're all connected in the middle. So that's actually quite a good way of doing it, which means you get them at the correct angle. I hate having to put individual propeller blades in, but if they're all connected together in the middle, then that means you get them in the right place, which is fantastic. Tail wheel, seat has some nice little sort of texture on it for our, almost like a cushion. And then these are our smaller parts here. So what they said about these smaller parts, you'll notice that the runner is a bit different. It's like flattened. The idea here is that you cut the bits of the runner off, paint these, and then snip them away from the runner, and then you add them onto your model. So it's an idea of making them a bit easier to model, a bit easier to paint. And then that brings us on to the final sprue, which contains our upper wing sort of inboard parts, our fuel tanks, part of the nose cowling and the front of the cockpit area, propeller spinner components, and cowling elements there. So yeah, this is looking to be pretty nice. I would just point out on this one, you can see again, we've got a few little stress marks from where it's been taken out of the mold. That won't show up in the build, but it is just a little bit, I think where ejector pins perhaps have struck, and it's been, maybe it's not come out quite as easily from the mold as it could have. There's a little bit of stress mark, but that's okay. That's, we can overcome that because you're not going to see that in the finished build once you put some paint on it. Drop tanks, very nice. Yeah, very impressive looking kit. So let's round up. We had 10 sort of dark grey plastic sprues molded to a lovely quality. Only the absolute hint of flash on there. The detail level is really quite nice. There's lots of subtle rivets. There's recessed panel lines. The fine details are quite nicely reproduced. We had clear parts, although there is a seam down the centre of the clear part, it is slide molded, so that's kind of unavoidable a little bit. We had clear film for our cockpit, like heads up display, what's it called, reflector gun sight, metal rods for the landing gear, and we have photo etch as well. Not to mention 7 paint schemes, cartograph decals, a nice glossy instruction booklet, and all of that came contained within this rather lovely illustrated box. And yeah, this is a very impressive kit. They've clearly learned a lot of the lessons that other companies have taken a bit of time to develop from. We've got all of those nice features that we like to see. 338 parts in injection molded plastic. That's quite a lot of plastic that we've seen inside of this box, plus photo etch, plus those little bits, extra bits and pieces. The one thing that isn't present, and I did ask about, was canopy masks. They did consider canopy masks, and they imagine that canopy masks will be available very soon as an aftermarket. I know some aftermarket companies will literally have these ready within like a day of this being released, so they are going to be out there. But they did think, you know, we need to, for how much they put into the box, what did they have to leave out for cost? And speaking of cost, if you go onto the DBMK website, this is recommended retail price of £95. So all of this has come in at just under £100 here in the UK at the time I'm making this video, which actually, I don't think that's a bad price. I think it's a very competitive price for what we have seen inside of the box, given the amount of plastic, the amount of options, the amount of choice, and the amount of information that you see in the instructions. Maybe there are a few little bits and pieces. You know, raised landing gear option isn't mentioned, the pilot isn't mentioned, but given the price, I think to add like a sculpted pilot, etc., would definitely increase the price. So it's trying to find that balance. I think for a 1/32 scale brand new tooling, first edition from a brand new company, this is a very competitively priced product for what we've seen here. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap this one up here. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of my unboxing review and whether my assessment of this kit was fair. Don't forget that we do have a Model Minutes Model Club, and if you'd like to join the Model Club and get exclusive access to videos and other perks, check out the links in the description. A massive thanks to these Model Club members for the extra support they give the channel, and if you'd like to join them, check out the information below the video. There are other ways to help support the channel if you'd prefer, but the best way to support the channel for free is by subscribing with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Just a quick thanks to DBMK for inviting me to their launch event. It was very interesting to hear all the different bits and pieces about the development of this kit, from its original design phase, all of the scanning of the real aircraft, lots of various elements of research that they had to do, and also their plans for the future. If you haven't seen their plans for the future, they did announce that they're going to be doing some F-86 Sabres and a early Mustang. I believe that one in 1/32 scale. So that's something that I could be interested in the future, because they are quite interesting aircraft. So definitely watch this space, I suppose. Finally though, last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this video, and I'll catch you on the workbench again next time.